The university system and the job market are destroyed. Yes, this is a popular doomer sentiment, but this isn't one of those college is a scam, buy my course videos. Instead, I'm going to go over how we got here, why it happened, and the cascading effects on those other aspects of America. Now, the modern college system as we know it starts around 1900, the turn of the century. But before this, yes, of course, there was college, but it existed in a different way. It wasn't with this purpose of obtaining a degree to learn about a field and get a good job as a job training program. Before 1900, university enrollment was really about truly exploring a subject of interest for you and just seeing where it goes. For a lot of people, it wasn't even graduating, it was just going for a few years to become a more well rounded, educated man for the intellectual elites. So, to really put this in perspective, we're going to go over the cost of college and the difficulty of college in historic and today's money. So, in 1900, kind of at the start of the modern system, right? A bachelor's degree, all 4 years, was $150. Now, to give you some perspective, in today's money with inflation, that's $5,470. Pretty cheap for a bachelor's degree. Now, not everyone can just shell out, almost 6K, but for what you're getting and for what it meant, it was completely worth it. Moving forward to 1960, the beginning of the end, a 4-year bachelor's degree was still $1,250. Pretty cheap. In today's money, that's a little under $14,000. Now, this is when the boomers went to college, right? I'm sure you've all heard, oh, I went to college after saving up money for my summer job as a lifeguard. How many summers did you work, Dad? 3 summers. Okay, Grandpa, it's ridiculous, right? But this is what they actually did. This is how they're able to pay for it so cheaply because it was cheap in that regard. The dollar was worth so much more, and it was just go and do it. Now, in 1992, things changed, and we'll get to that a little later. But this is when direct student loans from the government started, direct subsidization. Before this, yeah, people took out personal loans, business loans, all sorts of things to pay for college sometimes, but very rarely. Then the government started subsidizing them, and in 1992 they started doing it officially. And we look at today, in 2025, the year of our Lord, Anno Domini. In-state college is about $25,000 a year. That's $100,000 for 4 years, if you're able to graduate in 4 years. Of course, this is not including books, labs, other fees, housing, and out of state, it's around $43,000 a year. Bring that up to $174,000 for 4 years. Now, cost is just one part of it, right? We all know the cost. We all know the scaling and how expensive it's gotten. But what about the difficulty? The boomers will also say, it was so more difficult when I went back in my day. My professors were smart and they were tough, and it was hard. And this is true mostly, to a large degree. Of course, that had gotten a lot easier by the time that they got there. But people, the majority of the population, not even 50%, didn't go to college. And it wasn't a monetary thing, as we've seen. It was the difficulty. It was hard to get in. Only America's intellectuals really went to college because they saw the value in it and they could get through it. It was genuinely difficult for most subjects of repute. Looking at some stats here, in 1930, 30% of teenagers graduated from high school. Just high school. And that was the gold standard for a long time, which we'll get into. And in 1930, 5% of the population graduated from college, right? And that's a bit lower because, once again, 30% of those teenagers graduated high school, so 5% of 30% there. These were the people who could get in, acceptance, because these weren't the huge, sprawling state school programs we have today, like the California system. These were even the private schools, more like that, where it was, a student body that was concentrated, that was actually, preferable people. It was the interesting, talented ones that got in and made it through all the way. You were more likely to be able to graduate high school if you attended back in 1930 because to get in to attend, you would be kind of filtered to make sure that you could really understand it at a conceptual level. Now, college was rigorous and very difficult. Only the intellectually talented attended. Now, the price of attending was well within reach of the middle and lower classes, however. But a combination of its high difficulty and the low need to attend school at this time to get a good job made it pretty unattractive to the masses of people. You just really didn't need it back then. Now let's talk about the value, right? In the range of 1900 to 1992. The high school diploma versus the bachelor's degree, right? Back then, the high school diploma was the gold standard for academic achievement for most people. Anything beyond that was seen as exceptional. Now, this was at a time when high school was not an automatic pass, without bloated government initiatives to make sure everyone passed. High school was seen as an academic pursuit foremost, not a daycare or state-enforced training program, or a quasi-jail that teenagers were forced to attend at the point of a gun. A high school diploma could land you any corporate job, back then when office jobs still existed, almost any government job, and any skilled labor job for that part. Back then, a bachelor's degree during this period was seen as a massive achievement, based on the rigor of the academics and the staying power to commit to a 4-year program. It was a veritable golden ticket for any man to write his own employment after graduation. And I remember back then, this is when jobs would actually train you. And assuming you didn't really know how to do the exact specificities of the job going in, they would teach you. Isn't that wild? It was seen by employers in every field as very valuable. A bachelor's degree was going far above and beyond. Having one would see employers treat you with respect as an educated man. Now, this all changed around World War II, right? 1945 to 1950. This is the period it changed. When the soldiers were getting back, they had the GI Bill, which you might be familiar with. Basically, the GI Bill gave soldiers returning from war a free, subsidized college education if they could pass their classes. Results from this were so-so, but the biggest impact was within college administration. If the government subsidizes it, we can charge whatever we want. Thus, we need to lower our standards so as many people as possible can attend. Thus, we make the most money possible. Thus, higher education was no longer a privilege based on ability, but a right. And in 1992, spiraled into FAFSA, unlimited funds for anyone who would apply. Unless, of course, your parents actually made a decent living, then no money for you, even if you had nothing to do with your parents or they didn't support you in any way. Moving on to the current health, the job market, and its effects on the devaluation of college. The most noticeable effect of this oversaturation in the economy is the near apocalyptic state of the job market. Let's talk about entry-level jobs for a moment. Entry-level jobs just don't exist anymore. We've all heard the whole 5 years of experience for entry-level thing, right? But it's true, and it's becoming more true. And not only that, you are competing with 40 and 50-year-olds with 30 years of experience for the exact same jobs. Because of liquidation of senior positions to avoid paying out retirement and pension benefits, God forbid you find a job that's real, the competition is so stiff from all the other graduates and all the older employees that the wages are depressed into oblivion. The Elder Scrolls 4 oblivion. The hiring layoff cycle. Now, because of how corporations are valued, a premium is placed on growth over financial fundamentals. Hence, companies always must have the appearance of growth. This leads to a seasonal hiring wave to inflate growth numbers, then a planned mass layoff to rid the more senior employees who are becoming too expensive. It also serves as an opportunity to cull those hired that season if the company gets their forecast a little wrong. Ghost jobs. This has been a big one lately, right? This has been all over the internet. Now, as part of the permanent growth model, employers will post jobs on recruitment boards they have no actual intention of filling, but they are more than happy to send applicants through 4+ rounds of interviews to tag potential employees just in case. We'll put you in the database. We'll keep you in mind. We're just updating our records is the biggest one. Of course, they don't tell you this in the job posting. They tell you at the end of the 5th, 6th round. Regional salary adjustment. Now, if you're not a recent job hunter, you might not know about this one. But perhaps the most direct result of accreditation inflation is the regional salary adjustment. Instead of pricing a salary based on the work done in the position or the total value that an employee brings to the table, salaries are instead region locked. This is where I would do a Proton VPN ad about region locked content, but we'll save that for later. Based on an incredibly undervalued formula on the part of the employer. As an example, let's say you are an accountant or a graphic designer applying at a large employer with multiple locations. If you live in Los Angeles, the salary would be $55,000. However, if you live in rural Indiana, that same position would pay $32,000 for the exact same position, the exact same work. Now, this salary band, as they call it, is based on the cost of living analysis, mostly around rent prices that assume there is a fictional one-room apartment vastly cheaper than what's on the market in the area. God forbid you have a family in need of more than a one-room apartment, or have a car loan, or student loans maybe. So what can we do about this? That's a tough question. There is no simple solution that's going to fix it overnight. But the first step is clear. No more student loans, no subsidies, no guaranteed income for universities. With access to Uncle Sam's eternal slop trough cut off, colleges would be forced to significantly lower their tuition rates. They would have to downsize and admit fewer students each year. This would equate to higher quality education and stricter admittance standards to make sure students would actually have a chance to graduate, as too many failures would also hurt their prestige and their rankings. Now, would this happen overnight? No. It would be a slow, painful, hard process, which is why very few even float the idea. They just kick the can down the road. But sometimes things need to get worse before they can get better. As for sources of the stats in this video, my cousin saw them in a dream. But yeah, I know this was a brief one, but I hope you like this video. I put out content like this, so if you like it, subscribe, tell me how you feel.